Biden has withdrawn from the presidential race, and Russia is already assessing the impact of U.S. events on the war in Ukraine. Today, we're discussing this with Rostislav Murzagulov, writer, publicist. Rostislav, hello. Good afternoon. Here is Biden's withdrawal from the election race. In principle, perhaps it was expected. What is your assessment of the political twists and turns that are going on in the United States? USA excels at many things. There is a democratic procedure, and these procedures provide for any situation, even when something like this arises, when it becomes obvious to the fellow party members themselves that a person can't do more. I mean, the simplest thing for a seasoned politician like Biden to do is debate. He's been at it all his life. Look at the tapes of a young Biden. It's a political scientist's pleasure to watch the man work. His cognitive and physical decline is evident, which is becoming increasingly apparent to his party members. Democracy and the country's well-being are at stake. When a person faces such criticism and media scrutiny, they might come to realize the need to step down. For younger people. And this is a normal and correct process. It is a self-assessment of what is happening. How will this affect Ukraine? First of all, it's absolutely not a fact that Trump will win. Now, I think it was predetermined that Biden didn't stay, because Trump, with that heroic fist against a stained head, he would have won. Now you get an interesting paradox. Trump has spent his entire campaign criticizing Biden, always talking about Biden being old and so forth. Now the oldest is Trump, and accordingly now Kamala Harris, on his background, most likely I think she will be nominated because Americans are still quite conservative, even as non-conservatives, quite liberals. Which the Democrats in America are. Of course, they will take the path of least resistance. Vice President, the second person in the hierarchy, a more passable person, for obvious reasons. Despite this, I think the Democrats will try to introduce other nominees. I believe Kamala Harris has a chance of defeating Trump, and Trump realizes this. That's why he is now actively criticizing Kamala. It is important not to read or watch the Russian media on this.
Сейчас, конечно, первое, что не нужно делать, это не нужно смотреть и читать про это то, что пишут российские СМИ, поскольку, конечно, я не знаю, на что они надеются, они думают, что повлияют на выбор американцев или как. Это, конечно, очень наивное предположение, но в любом случае, конечно, сейчас просто они таким образом все-таки выдают себя, они просто очень хотят, чтобы был Трамп и чтобы было вот это вот.
I don't think they can influence American choices. It's a naive assumption. They seem to be hoping for a Trump victory and a truce with Putin. Their premature congratulations to Trump resemble Putin's repeated congratulations to Yanukovych during the Kiev protests, despite global scrutiny.
Весь мир смотрел на то, что творится в Киеве, и не только в Киеве. А Путин вот продолжал с упорством маньяка говорить, что нет-нет, поздравляю, нет, он все-таки выиграл. Ну, то же самое примерно сейчас происходит, они уже начали Трампа поздравлять.
In fact, I think Kamala Harris has a good chance. And even if Trump wins, there will be no tragedy. We have already discussed that Trump is a man without a clear political position. He will not do anything bad for Ukraine for one simple reason. He is a political animal, in a good way.
Это человек, который не бросится ничего плохого делать в Украине по одной простой причине. Этот человек — это вот то, что называется политическое животное, да, то есть это сейчас не в плохом смысле слова говорю.
What is meant is that he follows his political instincts. Accordingly, he will do first of all what is profitable and important for him in politics. Let's be frank. For Americans, the problems of Europe and even the war in the heart of Europe are not the number one issue. Look at any opinion poll in the United States, and it will become obvious. For them, their economy, social issues, and even abortion are more important than the war in Europe and the problem of aggression. From one country to another country, without deserving it at all. They don't need Trump to run to negotiate with Putin as soon as he takes office. This is a side issue for them. However, when they start to solve this problem, American patriotism and memories of all the great American geopolitical victories are revealed. Some say it in quotes, some without, but we realize that everyone has read Brzezinski. The doctrine of domination lives in Americans, in the broad masses of America too. When it comes down to it, everyone will remember that America's voice must be heard.
Тогда все вспомнят, что здесь, в общем-то, голос Америки должен быть услышан. А голос Америки заключается в чем?
And this voice is not about playing along with the bad guys from the axis of evil and helping to destroy a country that has proclaimed a course towards America, democracy, and liberalism. Therefore, there will be no tragedy for Ukraine. Moreover, I am personally betting on a Harris victory. We'll talk to you again. But I'm very interested. Did you notice that Trump has been saying for a long time that Biden's age will not allow as a going into the next term because Biden is of age and so on. Now Trump has become that older candidate, and if he wins the election, he will be older at the end of his cadence than Biden is now. Is this a miscalculation by Trump's team, or what is being talked about here? This is something that could really play out against Trump right now. You know, Albina, I don't think anybody expected Biden to get out of this race. First of all, Trump didn't expect it. Any president, even a Democratic president, has a lust for power, and nobody wants to give it away. Biden didn't want to quit either, but Trump miscalculated. Of course, Trump would never, ever go anywhere. Trump and Biden are really different. Trump is the spawn of the American oligarchy, although in the scientific sense there is no oligarchy in the U.S. I say this in a way that makes sense to the general viewer. Trump is an undemocratic and illiberal man. He would never concede in a situation like Biden. That's why I'm betting on Harris. Now they will hit the enemy with his own weapons. It will be very difficult for Trump because everything is fine with political technologists and PR people in America. These professionals will receive huge sums of money that, after Biden announced his abdication, started flowing in as donations to Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. Там все отлично с пиарщиками. Там сейчас все они получат вот эти все баснословные миллионы, которые в день, когда Байден объявил о своем отречении, просто посыпались, как из рога изобилия в виде донатов на президентскую кампанию Камалы Харріс. Even though it happened on a Sunday night when people didn't seem to have time to wake up, they did. Now they're going to hire all the experts they need, and you're going to see a lot of stories about Trump falling asleep, calling one president another, tripping, or stumbling. It will all be discussed and analyzed. There is a concept in political technology called the number of touches, kinetic energy in PR. I've been doing this for years, and I know there's no getting away from it. Roughly speaking, if Trump stumbles now, it will hit him with a powerful club, which will be the whole charge of all Biden's falls. Because the people who will be presented with this on a silver platter, shown from all angles, filmed beautifully and enlarged where necessary. This will play a cruel trick on Trump. So my prediction is that if Kamala Harris's campaign is run properly, she will gain support and Trump will lose support. By a small margin, I think Harris could win.
Камала Харрис будет набирать, Трамп будет проигрывать, и где-то с небольшим перевесом, мне кажется, что Харрис может и победить.
We're already definitively saying that Harris will be the Democratic nominee. Although Obama, for one, has not endorsed her directly, he said the candidate would be exceptional, but he didn't name Harris. I still assume that American politicians are very cautious and don't like sudden movements. Any movement other than nominating Kamala Harris would be abrupt because they don't know how the population will react to nominating someone else.
Сейчас любое движение, кроме выдвижения Камалы Харрис, будет резким, потому что они понятия не имеют, как население будет относиться к тому, чтобы выдвинуть.
The Harris situation is clear and not a lose-lose situation. She's a couple percent behind Trump, but there's a margin of error of a few percent, even though the polling in America is good. That's a very small percentage. Moreover, there's also a psychological point. When people are assessing the chances of a candidate who is not yet the official nominee, it's a very different thing than when the candidate is already in the race. When Kamala Harris is officially the nominee, pollsters will be able to appeal to Black citizens, Latinos, women, and other important constituencies. These voters who may have been hesitant before will see that Harris is already in the race and think, whoa, that's my man. This could lead wavering voters to support Harris. In America in recent years, everything is decided by a thread. Candidates and campaigns are quite similar, and reaching the electorate is difficult. The clear difference between Trump and Harris could play a decisive role. Trump is an old conservative man, while Harris is a young, bright woman. The appearance of this contrast and the use of Harris as a symbol of change could shake up a wavering electorate and give her an advantage. Therefore, while many continue to predict a Trump victory, I believe that Kamala Harris has a realistically better chance of winning. A new poll has emerged, and according to the latest data, Harris is only 2% behind Trump. Based on such minor results, how do you think you would build Harris's campaign as a political strategist? I realize this may look a bit rambling, but I'm interested in your opinion. What key points would you emphasize? You know, there can't be a few different assumptions here about how the campaign will be structured. First of all, the Democrats will certainly emphasize Trump's age. This is a very good political decision because the age issue is really important, and Trump's age is not young either. Secondly, Kamala Harris has a chance to become the first female president. America values sensation and innovation, and after electing a Black president, a female president seems a logical next step. While Hillary Clinton's candidacy failed due to her own mistakes and poor tactics, the situation might be different for Harris. Additionally, Trump's age is a significant factor. Importantly, there's a historic opportunity for a woman to become president. America loves novelty and sensationalism, and after electing a Black president, the next logical step might be electing a female president. While Hillary Clinton's bid failed due to her own issues, Kamala Harris might have a better chance. Despite her more reserved demeanor, her candidacy represents a new and appealing option for many voters. Because Americans don't want to elect a president who is perceived as a clown, they want a president who is a serious person. Therefore, Harris has a pretty good chance. In addition, there's another important issue, the stratification in America on national issues. There are serious racial and ethnic divisions in the country. Blacks, whites, Hispanics, and religious differences. Her image lets her appeal to many groups, show support for diverse communities, and visit shelters to highlight her empathy. But these people already have American passports and are eligible to vote. Harris can make her campaign very warm and emotional, built on contrasts and contradictions, which will give her a chance to win. I am very interested to see how this will unfold, and I sincerely hope she wins, as it will be better for Ukraine. Republicans are now demanding that Biden resign the presidency if he does not run in the future. The reason for Biden's withdrawal from the election race is not yet known, although the possibility of illness exists. Biden has so far maintained that he continues to fulfill his duties as President of the United States. If the opportunity arises for Kamala Harris to become President of the U.S. for at least 4 months, how best to capitalize on this situation? Albin, I take your hint about Putin's election when he used his temporary position to work for the electorate. That approach doesn't work in America. There, one cannot use one's official position to become president because there are strict procedures, and the actions of any candidate will be scrutinized to avoid any advantage. Therefore, this option is ruled out. Why are Republicans insisting that Biden leave if his health won't allow him to continue? They want Kamala Harris to start governing now, instead of focusing on her campaign, doing what I mentioned earlier, embracing those in need, and becoming a kind of mommy to Americans, including those who feel abandoned and humiliated. Instead, they'd rather have her immerse herself in a pile of issues that may be difficult for her to deal with. The problem is that Kamala Harris, despite her experience, has not run large systems, and she will have a hard time dealing with this challenge. She will be a convenient target for criticism, especially from Trump supporters who could actively attack her. However, Harris realizes this as well as we do, and certainly won't go for the presidency under the current circumstances. Biden, despite his depressed state, is obviously not going to resign. Even the format of his recent statement, made without appearing on camera or in the Oval Office, shows he is bruised. Had Biden's resignation been beneficial to the campaign, his fellow party members could have pressed him to give way to Kamala Harris. However, that did not happen. Republicans want Biden out so Kamala Harris can use the time to travel, meet voters, and add an emotional component to the campaign, which has often been missing in recent elections. You know, there's really a lot of different information coming out right now, including mixed reports from Fox News. We're not going to go into that just yet because there's no confirmed information. These can be either real facts or fakes. Nevertheless, if Biden continues his presidency in his current depressed state and perhaps not in the best of health, should we expect any significant decisions in the remaining 4 months of his term? I mean, decisions on Ukraine, on Israel, and possible fundamental changes. We should not forget that I am not one of those skeptics who think that Biden, leaving office, will just sit back, be sad, and not help Ukraine and the free world. On the contrary, there is a saying that American presidents work for re-election in their first term and for history in their second. Biden, being a mature and experienced politician, will definitely not be an exception.
Да нет, напротив, посмотрите, есть ведь даже такая поговорка о том, как работают американские президенты, да, то есть первый срок американский президент работает на переизбрание, второй срок он работает на историю. Байден очень взрослый человек, он еще раз, он политическое животное, в том числе также...
This person realizes that he has the last 6 months left in office, and this is significant time that can be used for significant steps. He realizes that now is a great opportunity for him to make history by reminding himself of his importance. We've discussed that in America, a lot of things are often done to favor business and corporations. Biden may want to demonstrate that despite his age, he remains a determined, intelligent, and responsible man.
Но он ответственный и умный человек, и он может сделать что-то для того, чтобы история планеты...
For example, he can take steps to stop practices in which U.S. companies that are actually profiting from the war hide their actions. This applies to the purchase of petroleum products that, although declared as Indian or from the United Arab Emirates, are actually made from Russian oil. Biden could decide to cut off this source of funding for Putin, despite possible protests and warnings from U.S. elites about rising oil and gasoline prices in the United States. In this situation, Biden could respond that he is not going to accommodate business interests and is willing to take action, even if it affects his electoral prospects. You might doubt my intentions, but I'm committed to doing what I believe is right. The U.S. president wields considerable power to impact international events, including resource consumption. For instance, he can influence consumers to stop buying Russian oil, which supports the war, even as Western countries continue to buy it while pretending they don't know its source. Let's have a little discussion and fix today's position, so that in 6 months we can discuss how things stand. Will Biden sit idly by, or will he try to make a mark on history, to be the president who changed the course of history and defeated those who are considered villains? I'm sure he will act to show his worth. Don't write him off. Now is his chance to make important steps and prove himself. I believe he will deal with his stress and try to realize his intentions. Let's discuss the Kremlin's reaction to Biden's withdrawal from the election race. The Kremlin said that the politics of the United States do not concern them and that they supposedly only follow what is happening in Russia. At the same time, every day we hear from Russian propagandists about the rotting West and how bad things are there. From tariffs to crime and everything in between. How would you comment on this reaction from the Kremlin? You know, the Kremlin's reaction lately reminds me of a game of Zornitsa. For me and for many people who have been watching world and Russian politics for many years, it doesn't look like real politics. It looks more like a fight between Nanayan boys, like a sandbox fight. You see, it all seems like a collection of words and expressions that I used to encounter when communicating with people like Dmitry Medvedev, Maria Zakharova, and God forgive me, my neighbor on Kutuzovsky Prospect, Vova Solovyov. It all seems like some kind of nonsense, and it seems to me rather pointless to discuss it seriously. There is only one exception worth considering.
Это все какая-то бредятина. Всерьез это обсуждать, мне кажется, довольно бессмысленным.
They very often give away their fears in what they say. It is a completely illogical and inexplicable fear that now a young, energetic Democrat will come in, change the entire team, and seek to go down in history as the liberal politician who changed the course of events and defeated the bad guys from the axis of evil.
Тоже захочет войти в историю как правильный, либеральный политик, как человек, который изменил ход истории, победил плохих парней из оси зла.
They are, of course, afraid that Trump will leave and be replaced by a young, energetic Democrat who will change his entire team and become known as the liberal politician who changed the course of history and defeated the bad guys of the axis of evil. That's why they are so nervous and calling Kamala Harris offensive terms that are unacceptable to people of color. This heat of passion shows how afraid they are of change. As for Trump, as we discussed at the beginning of the show, he cares more about what is happening in America. When his hands get to the issues of war, he will start discussing and looking at them from a clean slate. What Trump says now has more electoral significance than actual intentions. The Kremlin, without any real reason, is hysterically demanding a ceasefire or suspension of hostilities because it internally realizes that the situation could get worse if the current course continues. Look at what is happening on the front lines and how degraded the Russian army is. There is no fighting spirit, no desire to go into battle either. And even for fabulous money, they can't send them to the assault. Why are they only using landfills now, leveling everything with the ground first? It's because they no longer have the resources left for mass assaults, and Putin is clearly losing the war. Yes, perhaps I seem overly optimistic, but if the war drags on, it will be disadvantageous to neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians. In the long run, if the war becomes protracted, Putin will definitely lose because he doesn't have the resources to continue the conflict. He has nowhere to get resources. His partners in China are even shutting down bank transactions, let alone providing weapons. The Kremlin and its spokesmen are giving away their own fears, and their statements have no professional value. These statements and analysis of the problems do not stand up to criticism. Vladimir Zelensky recently stated, that he is ready to talk to Russia within the framework of the Ukrainian peace formula, and that Russia will be invited to the Second Peace Summit. How ready is Russia for a peaceful settlement, given Putin's rhetoric demanding Ukraine's surrender? Zelensky's statement may be a positive step, but to understand Russia's readiness for a peaceful settlement, one must consider Putin's current position and demands. Every war must end at some point, or at least be put on hold. There is a realization that there are other ways to resolve the conflict. In this sense, as Zelensky said in his interview, diplomatic measures are also important. He noted that there are ways that can work.
В этом смысле, вы знаете, я думаю, что, я вот редко соглашаюсь с Кличко как с политиком, да, он политик достаточно своеобразный, и я, честно говоря, предпочитаю, немножко других политиков, другой немножко формации, но...
Interestingly, even Klitschko, with whom I don't always agree as a politician, suggested that a referendum might be appropriate now. He suggested that asking Ukrainians if they would be willing to suspend hostilities in order to reconvene and use diplomatic means to get things done. There is a lot of talk about the possibility that NATO could provide protection to Ukraine in the event of a suspension of the conflict, which could change the situation. situation. For example, if it became clear that it would no longer be possible to continue military action against Ukraine, that could have entirely new consequences for the conflict. No one denies the need to return to the 1991 borders. That much is clear. But if this can be achieved through a suspension of hostilities, diplomacy, or perhaps the overthrow of Putin, which is also necessary for global stability to remove the threat of an authoritarian regime challenging the democratic world, then it should be considered. If it is possible to achieve the goal with fewer casualties, it is worth discussing. You see, I believe that even a single tear of a child makes a huge difference, let alone the casualties of war. If there is an opportunity to resolve conflicts with less loss of life, it should be taken. You mentioned the referendum. Here it is important to understand to what extent Russia is ready to adhere to any agreements that may be reached in the process of peaceful settlement. Who should be the mediator, and who will take it on? First, the Ukrainian government should take into account the opinion of the Ukrainians, as it is a democratic state. Second, if the Ukrainians decide that suspending hostilities and moving to a peaceful solution is the right way, then international diplomacy should be involved. It is important to note that trust between politicians plays a key role in global diplomacy, but with Putin, this is extremely difficult.
Вопросы доверия между политиками, которые часто возникают и которые, в общем-то, используются в мировой дипломатии, да, когда люди просто верят друг другу. Они с Путиным невозможны.
Putin has already cheated everyone he could: friends, enemies, associates, satellites, former brotherly countries. He has acted in such a way that his credibility has been undermined. In order to make him honor any agreements, strict mechanisms of control and coercion are needed. That is, it requires some sort of secret protocols to make it work. For example, Ukraine, Russia, the United States, China, and Europe could sit at the negotiating table. The parties could work out clear terms stating that if Putin violates the agreements, China will take measures, such as stopping purchases of Russian oil and gas. If China fails to do so, the US and Europe can impose sanctions on China in response. Such a mechanism could enforce the agreements and prevent Putin from violating the terms. I have a feeling that today, despite the complexity and intricacy of multi-layered international negotiations, the possibility of reaching an agreement exists. Otherwise, Zelensky would not be talking about such prospects. Of course, he does not reveal all the details of what is going on behind the scenes of the political negotiations, but that seems to be the way things are. All the parties involved in this complex serpentarium of like-minded people are now trying to find a formula that keeps the wolves fed and the sheep intact, while keeping all parties happy. If it is possible to find a solution that satisfies all parties, we can talk about the possibility of a peaceful settlement.
И вот если вот такое решение найдется, то тогда, конечно, только можно будет о чем-то разговаривать. Но, естественно, я думаю, что там будет, наверное, какая-то такая история, когда сам Зеленский ничего с Путиным подписывать не будет. Просто не захочется ему сидеть.
However, my guess is that Zelensky will probably not want to sign agreements personally with Putin, given that he does not want to sit at the same table with the man. Other intermediaries will probably be involved to avoid direct contact. Perhaps the agreements will be modeled after the grain deal, where the Ukrainians and Russians do not sign directly, but everything will go through intermediaries. When so many parties are discussing the possibility of such a settlement, it indicates that some secret formula has either been found or is close to being found.
Может быть, это будет так. Но все-таки, еще раз повторюсь, когда так много сторон заговорило о том, что это возможно, это говорит о том, что вот эта некая секретная формула, она, возможно, уже либо найдена, либо близка к тому, чтобы быть найденной.
Rostislav, we do hope for positive solutions, especially given the importance of this issue for Ukraine. If any solutions have already been found, even if they have not yet been announced, we look forward to hearing from our leadership. Thank you very much for participating in this stream and for your valuable thoughts. Rostислав Murзагулов, writer, publicist, and social activist. Thank you.